Hi there, everybody. Welcome. It is 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the 17th of September, 2018. It's Monday evening, and I decided to go ahead and go live early today because of a breaking news story that it's something. Um, it looks like a Russian spy plane has gone down over Syria. This was an IL-20. It's a spy plane. If you go to my Facebook page or Twitter, you can see a picture of the kind of craft. Facebook.com/End Times News Report or Twitter.com/Morphonios. Uh, Russia, Russia has got a base in the Himyim base in Syria. They've got a couple bases there. And so there was a Russian spy plane that was in the sky carrying 14 servicemen this evening when Israel launched an attack in Syria, and they started firing missiles into Syria. They had it was in the midst of this that according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, they lost contact with their plane. And so the Russian Defense Ministry announced that they're now engaged in a search and rescue operation, trying to find what they believe to be a downed aircraft. Now, there is an alternative here. And of course, at this point, it's too early to know, but it is a possibility as well that that the Russian craft was actually downed by a Syrian S-200 missile system that accidentally hit the Russian plane during the strikes, because Syria has got the S-200s, which are pretty accurate. So I'm not giving this a whole lot of weight, but it's a possibility. Syria was knocking down. I've already watched some footage of Syria using its S-200s to knock down a lot of these Israeli missiles that were fired into Syria tonight. So it is possible that Syria's own missile defense system took out a friendly. Just speculation. We're going to have to wait to see what happened. But I can tell you this: if Israel went in and shot down a Russian military craft on purpose, it's going to be ugly. We know that a year or so ago, Turkey shot down a Russian fighter jet. The argument was that this jet had strayed just yards into Turkish airspace up on the northern border between Syria and Turkey. That resulted in stiff sanctions from Russia, a lot of crackdown. We were kind of touch and go there for a little while, waiting to see if Putin would respond militarily to Turkey. It's a very sticky situation, though, because Putin has been working for a number of years now to woo Turkey away from NATO. Turkey is just all throughout history, this area, Turkey, Asia Minor, Anatolia, it's been called different things over the centuries, over the millennia. This is a very key strategic location. And having Turkey as part of NATO allows for a number of things right here next to very close to Russia. It allows for access or control of the straits that let the Russians get Navy ships out of the Black Sea into the Mediterranean and then out into the Atlantic. It also permits the CIA to operate quite a bit in the region. We know that a lot of the armaments that were routed out of Libya after the fall of Gaddafi were sent up to to certain Turkish air bases that also function as CIA bases up there. And after processing the weapons through the CIA bases, they would be given to the rebels and other fighters in Syria, including al-Nusra, which are definitely not moderate rebels. So let me read what we've got um, from Russia today. And I'll say one last thing. So in the end, rather than go to war with Turkey over this downed aircraft, they settled it diplomatically. There were plenty of sanctions, and it really started hurting Turkey badly. And Turkey saw, by the way, that when it looked like Russia might respond directly, um, NATO backed down. Turkey appealed for help from its fellow NATO members in standing up to Russia, and NATO would not back Turkey in that. And so Turkey realized, dang it, once again, the West has stabbed us in the back. We're supposed to be NATO allies, and they're just unreliable. And so, taking advantage of that, rather than fighting Turkey and risking war with all of NATO, with the whole NATO coalition, Putin played it smart. And he has been wooing Turkey, bringing them more and more away from NATO toward standing in solidarity with the Russians and the Iranians. It was just last week that Turkey met in a summit with leaders from Syria, Russia, and Iran. But anyway, we also know that Putin has a similar relationship, or has over this last year, with Netanyahu, where he has done some backroom dealing with Israel. So, what will Putin do if this does turn out to be an Israeli provocation? We don't know. Let me read you what Russia Today is saying, the latest report. A Russian military Il-20 aircraft with 14 service members on board went off the radars during an attack by 4 Israeli jets on Syria's Latakia province, the Russian Defense Ministry said. Air traffic controllers at the Khmeimim Air Base lost contact with the aircraft on Wednesday evening during the attack of Israeli F-16 fighters on Latakia, said the Ministry of Defense. Russian radars also registered the launch of missiles from a French frigate in the Mediterranean on the evening of September 17th. 14 people were on board the plane at the time of the disappearance. A search and rescue mission is underway. An hour-long attack on Latakia began around 10 p.m. local time and targeted a power station as well as 2 facilities belonging to the Syrian military. Syrian officials said the attack was foreign and came from the sea, but could not initially confirm rumors that Israel was behind it. The attack on Latakia came just hours after Russia and Turkey negotiated a partial demilitarization of the Idlib province, which is the last remaining stronghold of anti-government militants, including al-Qaeda affiliate Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is also Jabhat al-Nusra Front, al-Qaeda in Syria. All right, so that is one report. And Israel, on the Times of Israel, they posted this evening. A Syrian facility, remember, this is Israel's take on it. The Syrian facility linked to the country's chemical weapons program was bombed on Monday night, triggering Syrian air defenses, Israeli state media report, or Syrian state media reported. The state-run Al Ikhbariya TV reported loud explosions in the coastal Latakia province, saying they were likely from Israeli strikes targeting a state company for technical industries. The Syrian army said that Israel fired missiles from Lebanese airspace, adding that 2 people were killed in the attack and the facility was severely damaged. A spokesman for the United States Department of Defense denied that the American military was behind the attack, telling the Voice of America news outlet, "I can unequivocally say this is not us." And it goes on. It says that Syria's air defense shot down a number of incoming missiles, and that's why I'm saying there is this possibility that it was the S-200s that they could have inadvertently hit the Russian jet. I don't believe that, but to be fair and look at this in a balanced way, we don't know yet what happened. So either option is a possibility, though it seems more likely to me that it was from the Israeli strike. Also, just one more moment on this issue of the French frigate. Russia today said Russian airspace control systems have registered missile launches from a French frigate in the Mediterranean on Monday. Now, remember, uh, in advance of this buildup, Russia has brought an armada of ships into the Mediterranean off the coast of Syria to try to deter a U.S. coalition strike on the Syrian forces as they attempt to go in and liberate Idlib. So you've got the United States, you've got the UK is there as well in the Mediterranean, as is the French Navy frigate, the FS Avouan. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but this frigate fired rockets around 8 p.m. GMT on Monday. Let's see here. And one of the reasons that France is involved in this, you think, what is France involved in? After World War One, when the Ottoman Empire was divided up. Remember, the Ottoman Empire, back then we didn't have all of these state divisions the way we do now. There was not the state of Syria, the state of Turkey, Iraq. These were all the way that the Western powers carved up the Middle East for themselves, and they gave themselves control over it. You had the area of Palestine was put under British control, which is why the Israeli terrorists, the Irgun and others, fought for so many years to slaughter as many British soldiers and American soldiers as they could to drive them out of Palestine so that they could get to work on the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And just Google the attack on the um, uh, King David Hotel if you're not up on that. But regarding Syria, it was France that was given control over that mandate. And with many things, France largely mismanaged it, and they eventually it just became a quagmire, and they got out of it. But let me tell you a little bit more here about what's going on. There have been some good developments there around Idlib. But let me tell you uh, what preceded this. All year long, all throughout 2018, Turkey has been resupplying these anti-Syrian forces that are in Idlib. They've been giving them things like 122 millimeter grads, MRLs, things like that. I reported a week ago that Turkey had actually gone so far as to deploy battle tanks, Turkish military battle tanks, around northern Idlib, and they've now form a perimeter around Idlib in preparation for this pending Syrian operation to again to liberate terrorist control. But more than that, uh, creating a problem is that I have sources in Syria that say that Turkey has also been ramping up weapons and ammo transfers to these rebels, that they are trying to help these rebels dig in to withstand the onslaught of the Syrian army. And so they've gone so far as to provide these rebels with American-made TOW anti-tank missiles. So they are giving them some pretty heavy hardware. And if we look at what the New York Times said this week, uh, they spoke with rebel leaders in these groups. One of the reporters did. And according to some of these rebel leaders, because the summit that Turkey had attended with Russia and Iran didn't produce any kind of final agreement on how to deal with the Idlib issue, Putin was, trying to come to some understanding. Because there was no final agreement, Turkey has decided to go ahead and move forward with its own plans to reinforce the forces that it backs in Idlib to try and stave off the Syrian army. Um, a legitimate concern that Turkey has, to be fair to Turkey, is that they're already hosting around 3.5 million Syrian refugees that have fled from Syria into Turkey. And so Turkey naturally fears that this big assault on Idlib is going to result in another huge rash of refugees crossing the border into Turkey that Turkey will have to deal with. My thought on that is, well, if you don't want the problem, Mr. Erdogan, then stop contributing to the problem. These are the consequences of your intermeddling in the internal affairs of Syria when you try and back a coup against your neighbor. Yeah, there's gonna be some blowback. So I'm not shedding any tears over Turkey's situation dealing with the Syrian refugees. But according to what a Free Syrian Army commander, this is the FSA, not the Syrian army, but something called the Free Syrian Army, um, uh, which is a coalition that was organized by the CIA. An FSA commander told the New York Times that Turkey has full intentions, or at least they have communicated to the rebel groups that they intend to provide long-term military support. Now, if you ask me, a lot of this doesn't make sense. The story that Turkey is giving about how they're just concerned about the refugees and so forth, it doesn't make sense. I mean, President Erdogan is a mafia thug. This guy is as dirty as they come. And if I had to put money down on someone who is the fulfillment of an antichrist figure in the last days, Erdogan certainly fits the bill. This guy has grand ambitions of becoming the leader of a large caliphate. He kind of wants to be the new leader of a resurrected Ottoman Empire. And so this guy's ambitions, he even looks like, if you look at his face and his mustache, he's got that fascist look to him. But what Erdogan is doing is only going to make the humanitarian disaster worse if he's saying, well, this is all about we're arming the rebels to prevent a humanitarian disaster. That's just absurd. The best thing would be a swift Syrian victory. Clearly, the Syrians are going to win. The only thing that will stop the Russians and Syrians from taking Idlib back from the terrorists and the rebels is if the United States itself intervenes. And then, of course, we're looking at a massive war, potentially World War III. So the Syrians are going to win. It's only a matter of how long and how many casualties there are going to be in the process. So if Erdogan or Trump or anyone else who says that they're concerned about the humanitarian plight of those civilians who are trapped in Idlib, they should use all of their resources, all of their influence to tell these rebels to lay down your arms and walk out. Because they're going to lose no matter what. Unless, of course, like I said, that what happens in Idlib turns out to be what happens in Duma, which is, remember, down in Duma, which is not that far from Syrian capital of Damascus, Jaish al-Islam, which is a Turkish-backed group, was in control. They were in control of Duma. But the Syrian army had them surrounded, pounded them into submission, and Jaish al-Islam was in negotiations. They had already agreed to lay down their arms. The Syrians said, we will give you safe passage. You put down your guns. We will allow you. We'll put you on buses. We'll even transport you up to Idlib. So they were in the process of surrendering. And that is when that fake chemical weapon attack happened in Duma. And that's when Trump rushed in and said, we're not going to wait for an investigation. We're not going to let the investigators get in and see if there's any trace chemicals or anything that shows that there actually was this. We're just going to take the word of the white helmets and go in and attack Syria. And so the United States and the UK and the other allies in that coalition have been broadcasting for a couple weeks now, basically telegraphing to these terrorists in Idlib saying, guys, if there's a chemical weapons attack, we are going to come intervene. We will come stop Syria from overthrowing the entrenched terrorist network there in Idlib if there's a chemical weapons attack. Hint, hint, wink, wink. So we're just waiting for this to happen. And Russian intelligence continues to put out information, very specific information on this operation, including talking to parents. I've watched today interviews of parents who had children around Hama uh, province that have had their children kidnapped in the last year. And what these parents are saying, they themselves are saying, we are afraid that there is going to be another Khan Shekun, where the children are taken and gassed to death by the terrorists and then arranged in a way to make it look like it was the Syrian government that carried out this attack. The people on the ground know what's going on. Many of them do. And they're afraid. They're afraid that that's what's going to happen. And we know without any doubt, and I've put out the evidence in this last week that shows without any question that these extremist groups like al-Nusra have been backed by the CIA, by the Mossad for years now. We know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. The clandestine intelligence services of the West are the bad guys here. The British MI6 played a role in the in bringing chlorine in through I believe they came in through the U.S. bases that they've got down there on the border of Jordan into that 55 kilometer area that that the USA is guarding down there with military troops. But anyway, here is one of the problems that is facing Turkey, that Turkey has to deal with. And that is Turkey knows, President Erdogan knows that the Syrian coalition, including Russia, they have the right to try to eliminate al-Nusra from Idlib. Remember, Obama talks about how there are the terrorists like ISIS, and then there's moderate rebels. Well, it's a very gray line dividing who's the terrorist and who the moderates are. But I acknowledge there are varying grades. There are some that are just out to create chaos and slaughter the civilians wherever they are. And there are some who don't target the civilians and are primarily trying to hold on to territories and fight the Syrian army. So there are variations. And Turkey has been backing some of them. So have the Saudis and the Israelis and so forth. But al-Nusra, which again goes by the name now, currently they're called Tahrir al-Sham. This is Al-Qaeda in Syria. Tahrir al-Sham is bloodthirsty. These guys are barbaric. And there is no justification for them to be there. Turkey knows it. Turkey knows that Syria has a fair argument to make that they have the right to go in and get rid of al-Nusra. All right. So Turkey doesn't want to be on the side of defending Al-Qaeda. There's really no justification for it. So what Turkey is hoping is that some of these other rebel groups that are in Idlib that Turkey has been backing, they are hoping that they will drive out the al-Nusra or the Tahrir al-Sham terrorists, while those so-called moderates continue to hold on to Idlib. So Turkey essentially is hoping for a civil war between the various factions. And there's a bunch of different factions there in Idlib. And we're talking about 50,000 of these rebels. Now, further complicating this is that there in Idlib, there are even more extreme Al-Qaeda affiliates that are making threats toward the primary Al-Qaeda affiliate, Tahrir al-Sham, and its leader, who I've pointed out to you as the secret Mossad operative known as al-Jilani. Okay, they are saying al-Jilani, who everybody knows, if you look into it, al-Jilani is a Mossad asset that is used by Israel to defend Israel, to keep things chaotic in Syria. some of these Al-Qaeda affiliates there in Idlib are at odds with Gilani and his group. So as you can imagine, this is total absolute chaos in Idlib. Everybody's at each other's throats. And this is all happening while we've got the United States, France, the UK effectively threatening to go to war with Russia, Syria, and Iran if there's another chemical weapons incident, and we're all just waiting for that to happen. As we have seen over and over again since 2014, when there is this kind of insanity going on, the most sane individual in the entire mix turns out to be Russian President Vladimir Putin. And once again, here he is doing the best that he can to try and lead these disparate factions to some kind of solution that doesn't pit them all at each other in direct warfare. And so that's why Putin and he had Erdogan and Iranian leaders meet for a summit. They couldn't come to an agreement on how to resolve Idlib, but Putin and Erdogan did come to an agreement that is significant, a huge step forward in resolving this conflict, potentially. What they came to an agreement to do was to create a 15 to 20 kilometer wide demilitarized zone. The purpose of this demilitarized zone is to separate. 15 to 20 kilometers is a big area. This is to be drawn in between the anti-Assad militias and rebels and the pro-Assad forces, including Hezbollah, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, so forth. So you've got both Russia and Turkey who have agreed that the extremist groups like al-Nusra, Tahrir al-Sham, they have to vacate this demilitarized zone, or they are going to face the wrath of both Russia and Turkey. So in essence, what Putin has successfully done is he has negotiated a compact with Erdogan of Turkey for them to work together to root out the most extreme of these terrorists that are operating in Idlib. Okay, that's a step forward. It's not the end game, but it is a step in the right direction. If anybody deserves the Nobel Peace Prize throughout all of this whole mess that's been going on in Syria since 2011, it's that man, Vladimir Putin. I've got my beefs with Putin. I've certainly got concerns over his crackdown on non-Russian Orthodox Christians and proselyting and so forth in Russia, but I'll set that aside. Give credit where credit is due. He's doing a good job in Syria. Now, in addition to this, to help the United States and all of the lackeys from the Trump administration are all out there in the media talking about how Syria and Russia are trying to create a humanitarian crisis. They don't care about civilians. They're going to kill them all. That's not true. What Putin has been doing is Vladimir Putin and Bashar al-Assad, they've got Idlib surrounded. At any point, they could go in and just start firing. And they were going to about a week ago. They were ready. Everything was in place. Russia had even started its airstrikes to soften the targets up for the Syrian army to go in. But this is a smart chess player. When the United States countered with the propaganda about, oh, what a humanitarian disaster this is going to be. And Donald Trump, rumors were coming out of the White House. They were leaking from the White House that Donald Trump was saying inside to his advisors that he wasn't even going to wait for there to be a chemical attack. Just the simple fact that they were there, that Syria was there and was going to beat the U.S.-backed rebels there once and for all in Idlib. Trump was saying, I'm just going to go to carry out these strikes against them regardless. So seeing things and knowing how volatile and chaotic the leadership style of Trump is, Putin said, let's give it a little more time. And they have been working overtime trying to get these people to leave, trying to get the rebels out of the area, just like they did in Duma. The Syrians and the Russians have been working together to try to get these rebels in Idlib to lay down their arms in exchange for safe passage out. They will let them leave the city and go wherever if they just put down their weapons and leave in peace. Russia is trying to create corridors so that the civilian population in Idlib can leave, can get to safety. Eventually there is going to be a big battle. Just because it's been delayed does not mean it's not going to happen. It will happen, and it's going to happen soon. So they're trying to save as many civilians as they can. The problem is it goes back to this Israeli-backed group, al-Jawlani and his Tahrir al-Sham, al-Nusra group. They have gone out in public and built gallows, and they are hanging civilians in Idlib who they catch trying to leave. They're holding them hostage. They're keeping them in a state of fear. The people are afraid to leave. Now, there's certainly some in Idlib who have not yet tasted the tears that come from incredible warfare brought to their doorstep and into their own homes yet. And these people are still, we want down with Assad, down with Assad. We support the rebels. But those people will be singing a different tune once the bombs start dropping. But in the meantime, they are trying to let these civilians out. So I don't want to hear anyone say that Russia and Syria are just out to slaughter these civilians. They are making every effort to spare civilian casualties. They have even set aside for now, or at least put on hold, the operation that they had ready to go. They could have gone in, but it is out of concern for the civilian casualties to try and reduce it. There are going to be a lot, no matter what, unfortunately. There's no way to take Idlib without there being a large number of casualties. So be ready for that. And be ready for the U.S. media to go nuts against Syria and Russia when that happens. They are going to use that like crazy. The CIA and their assets in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, everywhere else, they are going to be going after the Russians and the Syrians as soon as there are some civilian casualties. So be anticipate that. Don't let your heartstrings be strummed by these Zionist spooks when that time comes. If CNN cared about this, if CNN cared about the people that are there in Idlib, you know how they attack Trump nonstop, 24 hours a day. They attack Trump. CNN should be having segment after segment saying, Mr. Trump, boy, are you a dummy. You could be doing something to save the civilians. And that is, you could be calling on the U.S. backed rebels to take the Russians up on their offer of safe passage out in exchange for their peaceful departure. But CNN, they could hammer Trump on this, but they're not. And that tells you who controls the narrative. Such an easy thing. Back in the 60s, back in the 70s, you could always rely on the Democrats, on the liberals, on the flower children, the hippies, to be attacking Nixon or whoever the conservatives were over war. They were very anti-war, and good for them. I would have been linking arms with them myself during the Vietnam era. But where are all these humanitarian liberals today? I don't hear anything from any of them. They're not on CNN. I don't see them out in the streets protesting the war in Syria. The neocons have taken over the Democratic Party, just like they have taken control of the Republican Party. There really is, at this point, only one political party in America, and it's the neocon Zionist Party. So anyway, Those are just some thoughts here, and I'm going to keep it short because I'm hoping that I can get back to monitoring the situation. If anybody sees anything, you're welcome to tweet it to me. Again, guys, follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/morphonios. And I'll say this. It looks like, let me translate this real quick. Hit my translator. Uh, in Arabic, the translation is Israel refuses to comment on Moscow's statement that 4 Israeli F-16 planes launched the attacks. And that's typical, though. That's typical. Israel rarely will acknowledge what they've done. All right. Let me look here real quick. I know I've got a few super chat donations, and let me thank those awesome people that donated, because I saw a big one in there. I think that was a very generous donation. Let me go in here. Bear with me. All right. Decentralized wrote, "Love your content. You have a lot of knowledge. Keep going." Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Squirrel and Wesson, as always. Thank you so much, Squirrel and Wesson. SA writes, "Keep up the good work." And SA often helps as a moderator. Thank you very much. Rachel O'Brien, thank you for your donation. And then John Cleveland gave a generous donation. He says, "Sorry I missed the last couple broadcasts, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, please spread Jake's channel like wildfire. The first step to get the people to rise up against the horrors we see is awareness. Donate $1 if you can. Leave a like and give a share if not." Thank you, John. You should be my official spokesperson. I'd have you do some commercials for me. That's great. And I will mention this. I did get, and I will thank by name and with greater detail. You guys remember a few live streams back when I was talking about the Zionist Israeli connection to 9/11. I had mentioned that one book that I had wanted for research purposes was this one, Welcome to Terrorland, and that I had never gotten around to buying it. And one of my viewers got this for me. It just came in the mail today, and I've been skimming through it. This book is better than I had realized. I'd read excerpts from it, but this is full of high quality investigative journalism on what the FBI was doing and their connection to the alleged hijackers that were down in Venice, Florida, before 9/11. So I'll officially thank in a different video. Guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Keep your eyes on what's going on out there. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. And I'll say this as well. I intend in an upcoming episode to read some excerpts from Bob Woodward's book. I've been going through it, and I'll tell you just a couple quick thoughts. First of all, I'm about halfway through it, and I have not yet seen the kind of detailed reporting that I was expecting to see. So far, much of what Woodward has put forward in the book is general knowledge or knowledge that you would get if you went back and just put together the timeline and filled in the blanks. A lot of it is just public information, open source information. There has not been as much yet, but I'm only halfway through. However, those handful of instances where he is doing original sources from people inside the White House, it's shocking. It is shocking. What is shocking is that Bob Woodward is showing how much control that Israel has in the Trump administration and how much of an Israeli shill Jared Kushner is. Right down to, I mean, it comes out and it talks about Jared Kushner's connections with the Mossad and how the Mossad was working with Kushner, encouraging things like cooperation with Saudi Crown Prince bin Salman and some other things. So it's really really eye opening. So there's that. And sorry, I'll end on this. I did see just one or two more super chat donations pop through. M99 wrote, "I'm poor, but take some of my bloody petrodollars for the cause." The petrodollar is I'll tell you what, you look at what these countries are doing. Russia, China, Iran is talking about it. Turkey is talking about it. They are coming right out saying we need to put an end to the hegemony of the United States as the global economic superpower, and they're saying dump the dollar. I mean, this is China, Russia, Turkey. Um, this is a big deal. The petrodollar is in big trouble. Big trouble. We'll see what happens as the dollar itself loses its value through these other efforts. Eventually, keeping the dollar tied to the Saudi oil is going to be untenable. So we'll follow that further. Jose writes, "Always wanted to support your great content." I'm sorry, Jose. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the last name. Holguin? Holguin? Holguin. Always wanted to support your great content. God bless you and other viewers. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. I really do. Guys, keep your eyes on the Middle East. Keep your eyes open. Some crazy stuff. Jake is not a Jewish name. I just looked over there. Jacob is a Jewish name. Yaakov is a Jewish name. Jake is my legal name. I was not born. My legal name is not Jacob. I asked my mom years ago, "Why did you not name me Jacob?" She said, "Because I don't like the name Jacob. I like the name Jake." So she named me Jake. So that's on my birth certificate. So anyway, yeah, yeah, that's what it sounds like. Listen, guys, thank you so much. If you want to support me, patreon.com/end times news report, paypal.me/end times news report. And I love the letters that you guys send me. P.O. Box 1333, Kernersville, North Carolina 27285. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.